Today's session is preserving employment in an aging society, and we're very happy to have Jeannette Galvanek from CareWise Solutions presenting today, and also, I guess, Emilia Yalkin will be participating as well. So, Jeannette, can I ask you and Emilia to please introduce yourselves?
Maria,
Yeah, I guess
Well,
Maria was overlooked.
Maria Diamante is sharing the platform with me.
Okay, sorry, Maria
So
as well.
that's right.
Yeah, I'm
Let
the
Maria-
student presenter.
Okay, you want to go first, Amelia? Okay.
Okay, so obviously I'm not part of the formal presenting staff right now, but I am Amelia Galkin. I am the student presenter. So if you have any specific questions while Jeannette and Maria are giving their presentation, go ahead and you may be able to privately message me. And don't be shy to, speak up during any interim during the presentation and give your questions and thoughts.
Okay. Maria?
okay, my name is Maria Diamante. I'm a PhD candidate here at Rutgers. I am writing my dissertation on the International Labor Organization. I have taught various subjects in political science and international labor, in business as well. I also sit on two nonprofit boards. One is anti-trafficking and one is for Native Americans.
Which department are you in, Maria?
I'm in global affairs.
Okay.
Thank you, Maria. And I'm Jeannette Galvanek. I am the founder of a small company called CareWise Solutions. My history is employment, and I was the senior executive in charge of human resources for AT&T. I left AT&T as the CEO for the Business Roundtable, which are the top CEOs around, the big guys. And I have a background in technology as well as human resources, marketing, sales. But for the most part, I have been involved in the transformation from the telephone company to a global telecommunications multimedia company. And that is how I ended up involved in merging the issues of the labor market, employment, employees, and the healthcare crisis that is called frequently the caregiving crisis, which is what I will target quite a bit of my conversation about. And then Maria and I will go from an individual perspective to institutional global labor market management. So you'll see how the personal aspect of the me in the conversation blossoms into a much bigger issue. And like all of the other sessions so far this week, we'll see that we're all at the precipice of change, that we are moving through the largest changes in the way we work, live, and care in 100 years as we're moving from an industrial structure to a connected age. And while many focus on technology as the driver, the human factors are probably the real drivers: who we are, how we define ourselves, and how we would like to live, and how we would like to age, and what that experience should be like over the next 30 years. So that's pretty much a snapshot of where we're going to be heading. Maria, do you have anything that you would like to add before we press go?
Nope.
Okay. Alrighty then, let's start with a slide that asks a very basic question, and that is, are your assumptions about caregiving correct? And we don't have a lot of polling and chatting going on right now. So what the purpose of this slide is to say basically that most of us think of caregiving when they hear the word as being something that's highly personal, it's very private, and it doesn't involve your employer at all. If it does involve your employer, it's probably like childcare, and your employer generously gives you 12 weeks off on a leave of absence for pay or not for pay. It's considered a benefit program, a perk, if you will, for some companies. Uh, as you walk through the conversation today, you'll find that indeed that definition is okay. It's the reality of how things are today. It's the reality of how things have been for centuries in many cultures, that family is the caregiver. However, you'll see that it is no longer just a family matter. It's a family matter that families can't solve and that institutional change is required. So let me just show you some facts that will help you understand the degree of impact of the caregiving crisis on employers. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with elder care, what we're talking about is really the baby boomer generation is dying. We are all, anyone who was born after 1947 is considered a baby boomer. And we're at that point in our lives that we're entering into a cycle that after age 65, every year is the likelihood increases that we are going to need some form of care. Now, that in the past would mean that you would get 65, you'd have some kind of a critical health event. You either would pass away or you would go into a skilled facility for some period of time, at which point end of life presented itself. Now we're talking about an aging society in which it's people are working until they're 80. I intend to work until I'm 103. I don't know about the rest of you, but our healthcare, our standards of life, living, eating, drinking, are taking us more towards 20, 30 years more than what our parents lived. Now, so that places us in a position that the impact of caregiving is a 30-year process for most people who are employed today. The big bubble, I call it the gray zone, is when the high performing workforce of today collides with the baby boomer population that is either retiring or entering into a care zone. That is all happening at the same time over the next 10 years, the critical mass. And what that does is it places an economic threat on our country. That begins when I do the analysis with saying, well, why should I care if I'm an employer if this is clashing? Doesn't matter to me, it's their problem at home. Well, the problem is, and this chart is a little bit old, it's 2015 data. Right now, there are probably 35 to 40% of every workforce that are direct employee caregivers. Now, I'm not talking about people who work for a home care staffing agency and are paid. I'm talking about those of us who are students, those of us who have jobs, that we are being expected by the healthcare industry to provide care for an aging or a family member with disabilities, which is usually a lifetime. So if the number is creeping up to 50%. Now, the number's not on this chart, but I will tell you that 50% a couple of years, 3 years ago, Harvard reported it as being around $6,000 revenue loss per company. That number just changed last week to $9,000 per employee per company. So if half of your employees are what I call employee caregivers, that's a new word that we're infusing into our society. They're employee caregivers, and they cost you $9,000 a year because you're not paying attention to them. You have an economic issue with your pocketbook that you ought to take care of. Now, again, the number was $36 billion annually of cost to our country. The interesting point is that all of us who are employee caregivers, and there are 69 million of us today, and there are 80 more million baby boomers that are going through the aging process. Just think about that. 70 million today, 80 more to go. The cost today of this informal care, which is unmanaged, uncredentialed, and pretty unsavory, which Maria will address, is it actually exceeds it exceeds the economic value of Walmart. Could you imagine that our nation is running a healthcare system, the equivalent of economic value of Walmart, exceeding, and there's nobody in charge of it? And that's what we're facing. So if we were in a room, I'd ask you, so how many of you know people who are caregivers? And you'd all go like, yeah, I think so, or maybe I'm one. And then I'd ask you, what do you think about their life? I mean, when you look at them at work, are they tired? Are they happy? Are they joyful? What? And you would answer some things that might be interesting. Amelia, has anybody suggested what they see in terms of people in their lives who either work or not, or about their family members that are touched by caregiving?
Let's see. I see a message from Kevin Webb, who mentioned that he lives in Thailand, or she lives in Thailand, and because they couldn't afford to live in the UK and are 69 years old. So their private health care through a Thai provider is about 40,000 baht per year. So obviously, the impact of healthcare is forcing people to shift to, new countries, which seems very interesting.
Yeah. Well, wait till you hear more of this, because you will see it's shocking. It took me about 6 years of research to pull all this together. And there was a time that when I worked for AT&T, I had handlers who would go out and do research for me and then come back in and say, blah, 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 blah. And I'd pull it all together and say, this is the direction. But I was doing all this myself. Plus I had a 98-year-old mom who was in that needing care. And I have 2 daughters with developmental disabilities on that autism spectrum. So I was getting hit from a lot of different angles. And being a CEO at AT&T, I felt as though, my God, if this system could bring me down, what does it do to other people who don't have the wherewithal of resources, et cetera? So anyway, I got into this, but the build of the layers of complexity of this, from asking, are you a caregiver or do you know somebody? It's pretty shocking. If you, not only do you have almost half of your team being a caregiver, none of us work alone, right? So how many people do most of us work with? Amelia, how many people do you work with, even if not in your?
Well, I'd say it depends, but it could be a group from a more intimate group of about, 3 to 5 to, my large classroom and lecture settings that could be, dozens.
Right. So, Arul, what about you? In academia, how many people do you work with that your work and life impacts?
I guess in academia it's a little bit more independent,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, generally we do work with, I guess if you include the student body and if you include the faculty, yeah, there is considerable interaction and discussion in terms of, caregiving and things like that.
Right. And Maria's going to talk. Maria, your view?
Well, for me, I'm a little bit more independent now, but when I worked in an HR department, if I did not show, I had employees who did not know what to do.
Right.
Because I had to coordinate everything for them every single day.
Right.
And I had to write it out every single day.
Right. Yeah. So, my my rule of thumb is that most of us work pretty directly with 5 to 7 people. And the broken family caregiving system, which is becoming more increasingly healthcare, my disruption that I have an emergency or I have to take grandma to the doctor, that takes 3 hours back and forth. I'm out of my job. The customer service doesn't happen. The colleague who is counting on you for the handoff of the work processes is saying, what's going on? During COVID right now, what we're finding, and it's not spoken about very much, there's finally becoming a loud backlash about these family care accommodations that are taking place across the workplace, because people who all of us are mostly generous about, you have a family problem, please go take care of it first. That's most important, right? But day after day after day, you end up picking up somebody else's workload. You start to get a little bit upset about it. Let's just use that. So there's a lot of backlash happening, and starting in Silicon Valley, and it's coming across. But in addition to, the whether you want to say $6,000 or $9,000 a year per employee in terms of productivity losses, let's add on to that for anyone in the audience who's into finances. You've got $9,000, and then which is about 5% of a company's revenue that's lost. Wouldn't that be nice to reinvest that in product development? Or how about in people's salaries? In addition to that, and I think this number is very low, we have 8 to 10% higher healthcare costs due to care-related stress illnesses. Okay, I'm not talking about anything else other than 8 to 10% higher stress illnesses, mental health care. The cost of turnover, in addition to that $9,000 a year, is depending on your level of your pay grade. It could be $12,000 a year to $150,000. No one thinks about caregiving as they would equal opportunity law, but it is a major legal issue. Litigation, successful litigation has increased 400% in the past 5 years. Roll that all together, and if I were a CEO, I'd say I need to revisit this family care thing, and it's got to be more than providing people with binders. Do we have any questions about that? Clarification? No? Okay, let's move on. Now, this conference is about corporate social responsibility and sustainability. Marie and I were talking this morning, and I said, out of all of the SDGs, someone would put in traditional thinking on slide number 1, they would say SDG, maybe work or maybe healthcare. But in reality, this touches probably 9 of the SDGs. If we start to add some other issues in, we know this is a prime issue. And for most of you, I'm sure that it's the first time you're seeing it through this lens. I hope that it's entertaining you and interesting and not too confusing. All right, so the drivers of change, the 100 years are being transformed, connected age, major demographic shifts, the baby boomers are aging. We've known about this, we're unprepared for it. Think about if the first group of baby boomers showed up to kindergarten and no one was prepared, these kindergarten students would be on the front lawn or on the sidewalk out in front of a school that was too small. There wouldn't have been enough teachers. There wouldn't have been enough books. There wouldn't have been enough lunches. What would have happened is more than half of those students would have been sent home for parents to educate them. Parents, maybe 35 years ago, didn't have 2 jobs, but they definitely had 4 or 5 children, and they had a house to take care of. They were not educators, so they were still asked to be educators of their kindergarten students. Kind of like what we're doing with COVID, right? We're sending all the students home. It was an unprepared system. Well, here we are, even with the history of the education system changed, the healthcare system changed. Suburbia grew up because of the baby boomers. We didn't have suburbia in 1950. It started growing then. The housing market went, the whole thing, okay? Everything has changed as baby boomers have gone through, the pig going through the python, and we are totally scratching our heads now about how could we be in this situation. We are. The issues of equity and equality, again, the underserved communities, which becomes, a very important topic of conversation this year, applies to employment and care in an aging society. In underserved communities, we have a preponderance of single moms. Actually, baby boomers themselves are, more than half of them are no longer married or didn't marry because of our preponderance to divorce and separate and the like. But we have a large population of single parents and or elder orphans who don't have anyone to take care of them. There are no accommodations for half of this 80 million people who don't have an immediate support system. In the underserved communities, what we have are situations where a single parent goes off to work 2 different jobs, and their high school student is forced to leave their high school education to take care of grandma. Again, the caregiving role starts as being 5 hours or so a week, going to the grocery store, maybe stopping by to let the dog out, and then it increases up to 44 hours a week, which is pretty much a full-time job. So these high school kids are forced to drop out. They miss their socialization, they miss their education, and then we support the enduring cycle of poverty. Probably 100,000 young students of color are faced with that reality every day. The education system has no remediation for this. They don't even know that it's a problem. If somebody drops, they just dropped, just no worry. So we have an issue there. The billing office is one of the big issues of our system. The insurance company has very strict, hospitals, insurance companies, private care, very strict boundaries. We're not seamless, so people get burdened with this. With social and family policies, I touched on that in terms of, for our society is negotiating a paid or unpaid leave of absence, 12 weeks. It doesn't make sense when you match it up to the average aging family care of 5.5 years a week. For a person with disabilities, it's a lifetime. So you start to see, and one element that we don't address either is wellness. If we're going to live to be 100 years old, I don't think we should have all of our healthcare reports from medical professionals in the academic realm referring to all of us as geriatric care. They should be talking with us about wellness and active living. One of the big issues of isolation during COVID is particularly difficult for aging boomers who don't have a family, are not in skilled nursing homes, which we know the story of that, but are at home and alone. Don't know how to use technology, so they can't even get up on a Facebook group. So, all right, let's just take a quick look at a video to kind of summarize what we're saying here, and then we're going to move on. Any questions there, Amelia? Are we okay to go?
I don't see any major questions, but there is some comments from Kevin Continued and also Linda Morris Kelly. So let me read those aloud. So
you want to do that now, or are they appropriate to hold?
Actually, we could probably hold this until the end.
Okay, let's take a Zoom. We'll have a little different entertainment here. Instead of Jeannette talking, we have a video, and I hope it works.
10,000 boomers have their 65th birthday every day in the U.S.
Jeannette, I don't see your video.
Proud Americans want to remain independent and stay in their own homes as long as possible. But over time,
Jeannette, I
they
don't
lose
think
the
you
ability to
presented the
perform
video.
the normal activities of daily living.
Jeannette, you have to switch your screen when you're
cleaning,
presenting.
driving, doing yard work.
So you're still on
medication.
Is the video in another website or tab?
I don't know. I'm sorry, we're having a problem.
Yes, so I hear the audio from your video, but I think you need to switch the presenting tab to go into the tab where the video is.
All right, let's, I'm sorry about that. Let's see if we can,
And doctor's appointments.
better?
So they
still
rely
don't see
on their
it.
family
Yeah.
for help. These family members all have other responsibilities, like work or school. In fact, 1 in 3 American workers takes on the volunteer care for an aging or disabled family
Does
member.
anyone else see it? I don't think I
They
see the
start
video
out
playing.
helping for just
I don't either.
which
You don't see
gradually
it?
increases to
No.
20 or more
All right,
hours
let's stop
every week,
video.
all in
Yeah.
addition to
I
their
think you're gonna have to
regular
exit
jobs.
out of the
Over the next 5.5
presentation
years,
and then switch
many
your share
caregivers
screen
want to
to
devote
the
all their
video
time,
screen.
24/7, helping their loved ones. Their health suffers, their productivity
I can
at
still
work,
hear the audio from the video
and
though.
even their family relationships suffer. So they use their sick days,
Yes,
work
so
fewer hours,
just exit
and
the
eventually
presentation,
quit their
go
job
into the same
and leave the
location
workforce
where you
entirely.
have the video and then click on it.
Companion
Yeah,
app
I can't hear
helps
you. I'm sorry.
employee caregivers reduce stress,
Can you pause the video for a minute?
Yeah, I'm
coordinate
trying to do
care,
that.
and maintain job productivity. Aging family members maintain their independence.
Okay. Back.
Okay, so I believe your video is a YouTube video, which is in a different tab. Am I correct? Or is it in the
Why don't we
presentation
do
itself?
this? How about this? The video will be available, and if you would like to watch it on your own, why don't we do that?
Okay, sure. Why don't we continue?
I shared the link in the chat for everyone that can watch it on their own.
Okay, great. Okay,
Okay, great.
all righty. Now, do we have our slides up on?
I think you exited out of the slides. You're gonna have to go to your screen and then share it again.
Okay, here we go. Well, there we go with a little technology issue. Okay, so what we're going to do while I get this sorted out is that, Maria, I'm going to introduce you
Okay.
to take this from, we've gone from an individual perspective, we've talked about from an employer perspective. Maria's going to talk about a number of issues that I'm not sure we even have a label for yet, but they all are showing the seriousness of the human condition amidst the structural barriers that we're facing. So Maria, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, thank you. And good morning to everyone. October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. As everyone knows, disability rights are human rights. The UN has a convention on the rights of persons with disabilities. We were talking this morning about the elderly, and I know this is something that I myself lived. When I had my father in the hospital here in New Jersey, we had someone with him in the hospital and in the nursing home with him around the clock. One night, when I was there with my father, the charge nurse came in and tried to give my father the wrong medication, which would have killed him. The charge nurse said to me, "If you don't let me give him this medication, I will call the doctor." My response was, if you try to give him that medication, I will call the police. That charge nurse went in, called the doctor, came back in and said, "You were correct." I said, "I know I'm correct. I know what my father takes." That's what we're dealing with in nursing homes here in New Jersey. Another instance, which will segue into what my comments are. I had my aunt in the hospital here and she needed some assistance. My uncle said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Then the next day, this Russian woman appeared out of nowhere. And she was my aunt's caregiver until she passed away. Have no idea where he got her, but she was a word of mouth referral that he was able to find. Like I said, she didn't speak English, but if there was a problem, she would ring his cell phone. He knew when he saw her number, he had to get to where my aunt was, whether it was in the hospital or the nursing home. So the issues that we have, and I'm just going to take a step back. President Trump signed an executive order blocking property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse and corruption. The labor market, there's not enough people to hire for this type of work, and they're being trafficked in certain places. This touches 100% of employees because at one time or another, everyone's going to need help. The Department of State of the United States issues a report each year about human trafficking. They have talked about the Philippines to the US for elder care positions, where women, mostly women, are taken from the Philippines, forced to work in a place, many in California. Their traffickers take their passports. These women are required to pay some kind of fee, generally in the $10,000 range. They're working 18 hours a day for a few dollars an hour. Trafficking is common also in Europe. People are viewed upon as commodities, and it's very difficult to track. What most people don't understand is this is international organized crime. So the US is combating efforts for trafficking. The US is using the Coast Guard. They're building a wall on the southern border, and President Trump is using his executive order and other laws in the United States against trafficking. Turkey is also a hub for trafficking. Lebanon gets many Ethiopian women that are trafficked into the countries and into other Arab countries. There are people trafficked from Indonesia into Malaysia, and very many are trafficked into Europe. Globalization has brought this on. So it's people are needed to take care of the elderly, and nannies and maids are used for this type of labor. So it's a global economic system. This is low-paid service workers. They're isolated, they're dispersed, and they're invisible. There's this demand for low-wage workers. They're not skilled at all. They're a serving class. There's household work that now goes to a labor market. The problem is we, as in our US society, we can't handle this. And this domestic work now is fertile ground for exploitation. Trafficking is one variant in a wider system of ill treatment by recruiting agencies and individual employers who charge excessive fees, people who work for nothing, excessive work hours, control of work hours, and sometimes there's even sexual abuse. So the societal problem, it's economic and it's health. Pre-COVID, and we know the problem with COVID, we had other diseases coming into the United States, tuberculosis being one of them. So there's systemic issues, there's institutional issues, there's opportunities in this country that we can expand caregiver roles and make it part of the educational system, where we can start like with internships and give people young people some meaningful employment. But we need to do this at an infrastructural level. So having gone through this myself and having to be my father's night nurse, basically, and then having to go to work during the day was exhausting. So something needs to be done because it's not sporadic and people need the help. And I'm not a medical person. There were things I just didn't know. And I had to become a medical expert in short order. And a lot of his issues came about after he took the swine flu shot. And that just started his downhill roll of getting extremely sick. So back to Jeannette.
Okay, thanks, Maria.
Unless anybody has a question.
Is it just me or Jeannette? I only see like a thin white band.
Yes, me too.
Maybe if you could try to stop sharing and then share again.
Let's try this again.
There we go.
You got
That's
it?
better.
Okay. All righty, that's better. Okay, so let's, where we are.
But it might be preferred if you went full screen with the presentation so that everyone could read the text on the screen.
I guess I don't know how to do that really.
I think you could present by pressing the little podium icon in the bottom right corner.
There we go. Okay. I knew that was there. Okay, so I hope that you're getting convinced that we're facing the largest shifts in the way we work and live in 100 years. The point of concern is that we could focus on me, the individual. I can't fix the issue. Most people are thinking that the solution to solve is to build a staffing system so that employees can go to work and they can hire people to do the job at home. The problem is that there is not a workforce, which is what Maria's point is. And the problem is that people who are family already work. So in order to solve this problem, what we need is a cross-industry coalition that, and by the way, this is global. I didn't talk about the international aspects. Baby boomers are around the world. There are only 3 countries in the world that I consider to be premier, and that's Australia, kind of UK, Australia, Canada. New Zealand is coming up on the list. That's 3 out of the entire world. No matter, I'm getting phone calls from, all over the world, people having the same issue. And what happens is that we are trying to, I'll give you an example. An employer, in addition to giving a leave of absence to employees, they'll say, well, we need to pay for someone to provide them with more resources to access the resources that are out there to answer all these frequent questions that they have. But the real issue is that people want to work. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to lose their income. Now, the root cause issues are that employees cannot be caregivers. My rule of thumb is that anybody who is a family member and has an aging or a person with disabilities should only be expected to provide care up to 6 hours a week. That our economic stability has to be managed in our nation to make sure that we don't go beyond that trajectory. Now, the only way you could do that is that you put in place a healthcare strategy. Now, people who are working on this caregiving issue are juxtaposition to where the technology and the broad healthcare industry is going. The healthcare industry is actually moving to a decentralized point that healthcare, other than critical care treatments that will be in a medical center, over the next 5 years, we will see more and more healthcare moving to the home. I call it the epicenter. The home is going to be the epicenter of healthcare, whether anybody likes it or not. And how is the home epicenter created? Well, it has a broader context of the local community. So all of the people in local communities in social services, public health, all the subcontractors, suppliers, et cetera, that are connected with companies have to work together and create a new infrastructure team that's focused on quality of life and aging and allows people to be employed. Now, that's a lot different than having a discussion nationally about a 12-week leave of absence and whether it's paid or not. Right? And we're going to talk in a little bit about what role academia can play here, and it's obviously there's a role for everyone. So let's move to the next chart. Okay. The infrastructure looks like this. On the left side, focus on quality of aging and longevity. raise the quality bar, build a legacy. What are my children going to say about my last 30 years of life when they're my age? I hope they say that it was joyful and healthy and active. Corporations have to realize that they have a major labor market issue. They don't have a family care issue. Employees have to know that they no longer take homework when they bring grandma to a doctor's appointment and the physician starts to tell them, do X, Y, Z when you get home. And many times it includes things like wound care. And will you manage what the allocation of different drugs are? And that we have to enable all of this with technology. So let's move to, because we do want to get to a discussion, sustainable development goals, leadership focused on the root cause, support long-term values. We have to put in place goals and measurements to make sure that that's happening. On another chart on my website, you can look at what I propose the goals to be. They are at different levels. Institutionalization, intensify private sector business responsibility. It's 10 o'clock. As Gina has talked about her Rutgers Institute for Corporate Social Innovation, that is the type of organization that we need to take a leadership role in bringing together the players with equal participation. Right now, the activity that is out there is pretty much caregiving organizations that are nonprofit, like the AARP or the Veterans Administration, and obviously they're focused on training all of us to be healthcare workers. We don't want to be healthcare workers unless by choice, right? Our goal is to be employed and loving family members. So, you know, it's just what you've been hearing from other people this week. We are at a point of needing change. So I think that now is a good point to open up the last 10 minutes to ask questions and have some dialogue.
Okay, so for these questions, if anyone wants to participate, you can either mention your answer in chat, or you can just say that you'd like to speak in the chat and I can unmute you so you can speak. If not, I could take a stab at the questions.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start that first question. What role could education play to transform wellness work and caring in our aging society? Well, obviously, you know, as Maria mentioned, with those lower class individuals being forced to drop their educational endeavors to pursue care for family members and those that are close to them, increasing, you know, access and stability in an educational role would not only help people become more well informed about the care they're giving to, you know, the aging workers that they have to support now, you know, especially with the boomers, so many of them aging all at once, but it could also help people get that, you know, get the job opportunities that would give them the economic stability to transfer those roles to more experienced professionals, I think.
Right. Right. And, you know, if we look at this as a job and career creation opportunity, that's what it is. If we have 70 million people today that are informal caregivers, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to get high schools preparing people either through internships, cooperative education to test out that the many different roles that you play in quality of life and aging, and then to have a certification program that you go out of high school into a certification program. Vocational schools and early community college education can provide that. And then we create a career path step that people can move into nursing, occupational and physical therapy. They can become phlebotomists. So there are all kinds of fields. But what we're doing is we're starting early on instead of just saying, geez, we've got healthcare is growing and no one has created these structures for which jobs to fill, and then therefore for the workforce to be developed, is kind of crazy. We have an opportunity to grow a whole new job path that's a career path, well paid. and particularly in local communities. Okay, Amelia, keep going, girl.
Oh, why don't I give one more note here? I just think it's very interesting because, I'm, a new college student, and seeing everyone in my high school, it seemed like anything in healthcare seemed to be, the highest, academically the hardest field to enter. I think that deterred a lot of people who were in, less privileged situations or supposedly less academically gifted from pursuing those other roles. I only saw people say, I want to go into the medical field, so that means I want to be a doctor or, a PA. But, now that you mention it, it's really important to mention the wide variety of roles, because a lot of those new roles that we need aren't just doctors and physicians assistants. They are those, much more specified caregiving, nursing, and, more particular roles that people seem to overlook if they suppose they don't have the resources to pursue a direct, doctor as the end goal field.
Right. Good. That's good to hear. Now, one thing I just wanted to point out to reinforce what you're saying is that I like to watch Walmart and what they're doing. They, Walmart is very socially responsible, and I know that they're very progressive about hiring people with disabilities, and they support local communities in many, many ways. I've always wondered, though, about their team, let's just call them old language supervisors. Well, they've just switched last month or two that team leaders, their supervisors are going away, and team leaders are now going to be much more cross-functional, and they're going to have greater degrees of accountability in managing their frontline team than they ever did. So that is a model, and if you apply that model over to this multidisciplinary healthcare area that we're talking about, Walmart's on it. You might not realize it. And if you look at COVID, what it's done to the workplace, the one group of people who have had the largest issue of job change and not knowing what to do during this COVID experience is supervisors. And why is that? Because people don't need supervision. They're working horizontally. They're working in a virtual work environment. The hierarchical structure of the industrial society can go away, but it's still there. Supervisors are the first ones who have lost their role. So these local teams will be very interesting to the next generation of workers who want to be more autonomous, and they want to be able to have full jobs and work across a couple of disciplines. So, yeah. Okay, Amelia, we had something from Linda. We had a question from Linda Morris.
Yes, let's go back up. Let's see, Linda mentioned, a thought saying that she talks with people that are working from home, for these many months from COVID, from school-age children to, the elderly, and, parents are becoming very stressed and wondering if it's possible to continue this cycle of, the younger generation supporting the older generations. It's a very, pressing issue. And then Kevin also mentioned that even though he doesn't have any direct answers about how, we could contribute to solving this issue, he thinks that a lot of this is a capitalistic endeavor. And, a lot of people want cheap healthcare, but care workers need to be paid appropriately in order to, maintain those positions and, keep the industry alive. No one wants to be a healthcare worker and go through all that training and, professional endeavors just to not get paid appropriately.
Well, that's absolutely right. It's Kevin, right? The issue is this, okay? What Maria was talking about is that, first of all, in the United States, and you can mirror this in other countries, we don't have no one's developed a workforce to do this kind of work. Now, let's not even talk about the fact that we don't have the job defined, right? So what happens is that this whole system is pretty much staffed by unqualified, uncertified, unsupervised people who come in from other countries. And they're many times illegal. They're living in group home situations. They're bringing illnesses to the place where they're, whether it be a nursing home or the home. And that's the network. I mean, we had that happen in my own family. We sat down and had a family talk about what we were going to do about grandma. And my brother says, oh, I've got that taken care of. And then the next day he says, oh my gosh, I called through this referral and a woman showed up on the bus stop the other day with a bag. She was ready to move in. And I go like, what'd you do? He said, I had to give her money and send her home, but I didn't know how to deal with this. I said, multiply that times 60 million other people every day who don't know how to manage it. So those companies in Silicon Valley who have been caregivers, a couple of CEOs now are funding millions of, maybe $1 billion staffing company. And I called them and I said, you know, you can build the best staffing system in the world, but you don't have people to put into the staffing system. They're not there. And how many people who are illegals are going to apply through your staffing system for home care? It's got to become a certifiable job that gets good pay and is recognized as added value. Right now, it's not. That's why we send it home, we don't pay it, and it's not managed.
Well, just to piggyback on what Jeannette said, you know, I'm wondering if the Rutgers Medical School could offer a nursing assistant, a home caregiver program through the hospital, train people, certify them some, you know, whatever certifications they need, and then send them out in the community. Why not? And then you get a handle on it.
Well, that's creating a model. And I think that's a great idea, Maria. But what we would need is a company like the Johnson & Johnson that is an advocate for nursing to represent the private sector and the nursing community. There are organizations like Dartmouth University that are asking questions about the home care delivery team. Someone like that could come in. I know that there's a major university medical center in Newark that might be a good player. Prudential or United Healthcare would be great insurance carriers to bring in. Amazon is growing their distribution centers all around. Get a company like Amazon in, have some of the experts at Rutgers Business School to play, other Fairleigh Dickinson, others to come around the table and create a structure that becomes a model that we then can transfer to other communities, other epicenter hubs. Right now, there's not even a common language. So if we were able to do something like that, Maria, it would be a very, very big advantage to catapult this from a crisis to a beginning model.
I know, but see, the problem, I think, in my opinion, you need somebody like the governor who understands what the sustainable development goals are, so he can do something and it trickles down. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't get it from the top, it's not going to happen.
That's correct. That's correct.
It just won't.
Right. Now, a year ago, you know, it was very hard for me to have this conversation because people were going like, I don't get it. Now with COVID has accelerated increased attention. But, you know, I don't know, does anybody on the Zoom call have a connection with the governor or the prime minister of your country? And the ability to get someone to say, yeah, we need a collaborative team to do something here.
Seems like we have some additional comments. Okay. We have an additional issue from Linda, who mentioned that a companion issue to the one she mentioned before is, you know, the pulling of essential workers who have to pull their weight between work, caring for their elderly parents, and then caring for their children.
Right.
So if anyone has a comment on that.
Well, you know, there's a part of me that says it's insulting that the media continues this discussion and refers to people as the sandwich generation. How dare we do that? You know, people, Linda, like you're talking about, end up not only losing their job stature means they either go to part-time or some kind of extreme flexible arrangement. They lose almost $250,000 in their lifetime in 401k contributions, Social Security contributions. They have a stigma, so they get off the career planning, succession planning, promotion lists. I mean, the impact on that individual. Plus, they're falling over with financial debt. They're paying like $10,000 extra a year to fund parents who don't have coverage, and they don't want to be a burden to their kids, but they end up. So that person in a sandwich is paying for their parents' care. And you know what? And there's one thing that has to happen, which is probably the most important thing, and that is that right now our insurance coverage does not recognize personal or family care, and that is becoming much more serious health care as a coverable payment. So the minute you leave, say you have a knee surgery, the minute you leave the office, the surgeon sends you home, that you see a physical therapist that's a paid service. And if you have coexisting conditions that, are building your care needs, they don't care. It's just, they're going to work on physical therapy, and you're going to continue to get ill until such a point that you are eligible to go into a medical system that's paid. Now, once you go into that medical system, people can't afford $12,000 a month for a nursing home. So they lose all of their life savings and go on welfare. So 80% of the people who are in nursing homes are paid for by the government. We're just moving the shells around, the burden of this system is on employers and family. The healthcare, I believe fundamentally in my heart of hearts that the healthcare system has quite a deal, Kevin. They are borrowing the employees. They're borrowing the employees from the private sector to do work that should be in their headcount and should be paid for through the commercialized healthcare system. They're making plenty of profits. By ignoring this, they are avoiding all social, economic, and labor responsibility. So I'm just going to say that until that window, from the time you leave your physician's office until the time you're ready to go into the last 2 or 3 years of your life, until somebody starts to cover parts of that through payments, this is not going to go away. Now, I'm not saying that the government ought to pay for it or the corporations ought to pay for it. I think that what balances out in my mind is that corporations right now are losing probably 10% of their annual revenues. So why don't we cut their 10% of their revenue losses by 5? They contribute, instead of 10,000 or 15,000 a year, they contribute 7,000 in addition to their healthcare bills. The government picks up a lot. The mainstay of responsibility for developing this workforce and the system solutions has to be with healthcare. And a piece of it is driven in healthcare has to drive insurance. Now, how do you make this change happen? If I put my my $100 bet on the table, it's to say to CEOs around the country, do you know that you are loaning 50% of your workforce to the healthcare industry, and it's costing you 10 to 15% of your annual revenues? And they go like, what? And I go like, yeah. So what you want to do, CEO, is this. First of all, tell every insurance company that you want them to have all of their staff has to work with whoever they need to in every other government organization. And I want one point of contact for every one of my employees so they don't spend, 20 hours a week trying to coordinate your administrative stuff. Number 2, you say to the healthcare industry that I'm going to start to reduce your payments for healthcare by 10% or 20% every year until my expenses for family care go down and your management goes up. And so fix the insurance issue and have the private sector get healthcare to do its job and have the insurance company pay what they have to pay. That is something that can be, if I could figure this out, somebody else could figure it out. You can decide what the dollar amounts are. Okay, that's a negotiation process. But focusing on the root cause means you have to have accountability, and you have to have resources in the right place, and treat this with the value system that says this is worth a management intervention. How's that, Linda?
Okay, so I think we're running a little bit low on time now. The next presentation starting in a little bit less than a minute. So I think we're going to have to wrap it up.
Just to piggyback just one little thing, Jeanette, and I agree with everything you say, but I think the lead has to be taken from the government, and maybe incentives for this come through the tax code.
Okay. All right.
Just a thought.
All right.
If
So
you can take child care deductions, you can take elder care deductions.
yeah, but it's so insignificant. It's so insignificant. Nobody looks at. Yes, we're talking.
But that's just a thought.
No,
Just to get started.
The solution is there are a number of pieces of the puzzle, and I think that's one we should add to it. And
I agree.
In terms of next steps, I want to thank all of you for participating. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope it makes you think about, if you're over 50, to ask yourself what you're doing to prepare yourself for your aging or disability care. I think that if you have a family member who's over 50, whether they're your mom or dad or cousin or someone, that you ask what role might you play in making sure they're prepared. And if you're an influencer in the government or a corporation, how about if you start to have this discussion with people and say, this is not a matter of if, this is a matter of when this caregiving crisis is going to knock on your door. It's coming for all of us.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
This
very
is-
much. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everybody.